Dear students, let us start the discussion on today's newspaper, that is 05th March 2016 newspaper. So in this context, let us talk about the editorial by Aruna Roy and Nikhil Dey. Now, we are not going to take the dimension which they are talking, which is too critical, but what is their underlying concern in relation to our syllabus we need to understand over here. Now, the first statement I am making, which is a derivative of article, is this. The nationalism and patriotism do not have a single dimensional narrative. Now, we have seen in the last few weeks, the nationalism can be cultural nationalism, or we can call it as territorial nationalism, progressive nationalism, aggrandizing nationalism, democratic nationalism. So there are multiple interpretations to the nationalism. So similarly, patriotism is not just adherence to certain symbols. Patriotism is about respecting the collective values of a given society. So in these circumstances, I can say the symbols form a part of the patriotic zeal. So we can say nationalism and patriotism, they do not have a single narrative under any circumstances. Now, constitution is the supreme law of land, and constitutional institutions, they form the bedrock of democracy. So every one of us has to give respect to these constitutional institutions. If they are losing their significance in a democracy, and existence of democracy comes under threat. In a democratic system, again, political system, dissent is a very integral part to it. And dissent against the government is not anti-national, but it is anti-governmental. The objective is to give a different dimension to the governmental viewpoint. It is not about acting against to the government. Now, if you see our constitutional framer's mind, the idea of India they envisioned is this, which is to be built on freedoms, built on pluralism, and which has to protect for the different ways of life, that is secularism. So in this context, any action that goes against to this has to be seen as unconstitutional. So equality, justice, these are the ultimate goals the Constitution aims to achieve. So any action of the state has to be directed towards them. Now, any constitutional democracy, in a constitutional democracy, the government's major responsibility is to uphold the rule of law. So here, any nepotism, personal or organizational or party loyalties, they do not come into picture. Anyone and everyone who violates the law shall face the justice. So in this context, a partial and partisan behavior by the state, it is not in the spirit of the democracy. So either it is state or civil society in a democracy, the final objective is one and the same. That is to bring in a justice or collective justice to all the people. So in this case, the state and civil society may differ in their opinions, and that opinions is difference is to achieve a much bigger goal. So this opinion difference is just a means, a different style of action, but the end of all of them in a democratic society is one and the same. So these points they tried to highlight through a different tone. So you carry these points to your examination. Now, with regard to the urban transportation, you know that the motor vehicles and related subjects, they come under the state list. So the center is going to provide for a guideline or an overarching law which the state, if they are interested, they can follow. So the 2016-17 budget, it has spoken about ending the monopolies in the transport system, especially the passenger transport system, and providing an opportunity for competition. You all know that today the private vehicles are increasing due to the inadequacy of the public transport. The strengthening of the public transport suffers from various state monopolies which are in operation. So opening up this sector for the private people is a welcomeable sign. But however, any private sector, we have to be careful about proper regulation to ensure that the standards are maintained, competition prevails, and the consumer benefits from it. So the London is the best example over here, where the train and the bus services are well integrated, and intelligent use of the systems to make this function. So in these circumstances, what we can say is this: the bus commuters, they are supposed to given a wider choice by giving opportunity for the private players. It is in the light of the ongoing crisis of the urbanization. Coming to the India needs highways and highways. So the Prime Minister Modi is talking about role of infrastructure in development. So a new program is launched that is called Setu Bharat. At the level crossing of railways, it is meant to build the bridges. So in this context, highways, they talk about the building the digital divide. Highways, they are connectivity, that is physical connectivity. So the rural-urban connectivity is the major focus of discussion over here. So similarly, if you take our budget, Prime Minister's Gram Sadak Yojana, everything has got a decent focus now. Coming to the gold bond scheme, I have discussed this in previous videos, but again, the government is launching the third phase of the gold bond scheme. So in this context, let us see what is gold bond is all about. The gold monetization scheme is different and sovereign gold bond scheme is different. Here, a bond will be issued to the 5 grams, 10 grams, 50 grams and 100 grams of gold denominations. It is kind of a paper gold. So, when you buy that gold at today's market price, at the end of the maturity of the bond, you get a 2% interest rate on today's investment plus the market rate of the gold on that particular day when you are encashing your bond. It means it discourages the people from buying gold as an investment choice. So instead of buying gold, I will go and buy this bond, and this bond will be encashed after the maturity at the market prices. So whatever the benefits of investment in investing in gold I am getting through this bond. So the third phase is launched with regard to this. Next, Brazil. The Brazil is going through the worst crisis. What are the reasons for the crisis? I mean, you will be surprised to know that the fiscal deficit of the Brazil has crossed 9% and the inflation is around 12%. And there is around 60+% of depreciation of the currency. What is the reason for all this? Now, China is majorly a mineral export dependent economy. So when the demand was at its peak in Brazil was a mineral export company. When the demand was peak in China, Brazil majorly earned its revenues through the export of this copper iron. Now, the commodity prices have drastically decreased and also the global demand has come down, especially in China. So because of this, the revenues to the states have dramatically decreased. And it has led to the macroeconomic instability. And it has opened up the new charges of corruption against the existing president, Rousseff, and also the Lula da Silva. And because of this economic situation, Fitch, Standard and Moody, they have downgraded the sovereign ratings of Brazil. Now the Brazil bonds are called as junk bonds. Junk bond means the bonds have no value. So because of this, the flight of the capital is going to be a scenario. And it's going to worsen the situation further in the Brazil. Next is US pivot to Asia. Now, under this, more than 70% of the United States fleet, it will be deployed in Asia Pacific. So in this case, Vietnam, Philippines, all these countries, they are in dispute with China on the South China Sea. And China also building the artificial islands and has recently deployed surface-to-air missiles at the Woody Island in the Paracel Island group. So in this context, China criticizes United States. Its presence in the South China Sea is raising the tensions over there. And it wants to cooperatively engage with the other states who are having a dispute. But however, the presence of United States of America is complicating that, and it is nowhere ready to compromise on its sovereign right. Next is, and United States of America has praised India and its way of solving its international disputes, probably especially with Bangladesh. And China has said that His border disputes are getting complicated. And in this context, the United States, Japan, India, and Australia, deeper engagement is seen with suspicion, and China believes that it is directed against it. So the Malabar exercises this time, it is going to be held in North Philippine Sea, and these Malabar exercises are going to involve India, US, Japan. And also the strategic dialogue is going between India, Australia, and Japan. United States also wants to join this strategic dialogue. So it is seen as an axis that is developing against the China and its might in Asia. Supreme Court to evolve a mechanism to clean up legal profession. You know that many untoward actions are demonstrated by the legal professionals in Patiala courts and in defiance of the Supreme Court order to maintain the calm. So in this context, the Supreme Court wants to clean up the profession once for all by providing for various filters so that the anti-social elements do not enter in. So in this case, what we can say is this: the Supreme Court shall take a strong action so that this particular incidents do not get repeated, because you have seen in Tamil Nadu High Court, that's Madras High Court, it has become a routine incident, the lawyers agitating. So the same is the case with regard to the Andhra Pradesh High Court too, and the same thing has happened in Patiala courts. So in this context, the constitutional bench is appointed by the Supreme Court on these matters. So this is about today's newspaper. Now, thank you very much for your beautiful comments and all the best.